The backlash over California's sanctuary state is heating up. San Diego could be joining Orange County in challenging the new state law. We're going to talk to the San Diego supervisor leading the charge. That is coming up. But first, wow, let's get to these volatile markets. April not getting off to a very rosy start here. Worries about trade and a tech sell-off hitting stocks really hard today. Welcome, everyone. I am Trish Regan, in today for Neil Cavuto, and this is your world. Fox Business Network's Charles Payne, host of Making Money on FBN. He joins us right now with a look at what has got everyone so rattled, and I can say at least we didn't close at the lows of the session, but wow, what a day, Charles.
Yeah, I know. It's a day when you're down 462 points in a down, it's a moral victory. A lot has people rattled. Of course, we were off more than 700 points at the worst part of the day. It's a selling carnage, to be quite frank with you, Trish, that was felt in every single sector of the market. Now, your key themes were uncertainty and negative speculation over the unknown, things that may or may not happen. Amazon taking its biggest one-day drubbing in its history after President Trump weighed in on its uneven deal with the U.S. Postal Service. Meanwhile, Facebook continues to get hit. This, of course, in the aftermath of its privacy fiasco that has Mark Zuckerberg now saying it could take years to overcome. And the biggest loss in tech, however, came in the semiconductor area, which had been on fire for most of 2018, but getting slammed today on reports that Apple may produce their own computer chips for Mac products by 2020. Intel was your biggest percentage loser in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Then, well, there's a trade battle with China, which intensified today as that country officially increased their tariffs $3 billion. The focus there right now, food, fruit, and pork. One area that could be hit in the next salvo, that would be retail products from clothing to electronics, and that pressured shares of Walmart today. And then, of course, there are products that we export to China, including aircraft and construction equipment. They could fall victim in an accelerated tariff battle, if you will. Shares of Boeing and Caterpillar off on that speculation. Now, adding to all of the uncertainty is the jobs report, which comes out on Friday, and it's going to cast a shadow all week long as Wall Street is worried that there might be too many jobs and wages could actually increase by too much, Trish. Yeah. Now, Amazon shares, of course, getting crushed today. President renewed attacks on the tech giant.
All right, thank you so much.
You got it.
Charles, all right, as you said, Amazon had a pretty tough day as well here, getting crushed as the president renewed all his concerns about the tech giant, antitrust concerns, amid other concerns. The president's been doing this actually for kind of a while, but only recently has the stock taken a hit as a result of it. Take a look here, the president's latest tweet saying, and I quote, "Only fools or worse are saying that our money-losing post office makes money with Amazon. They lose a fortune. And this will be changed. Also, our fully tax-paying retailers are closing stores all over the country. Not a level playing field." My next guest thinks this is a battle that the president should not be waging. Former 2012 GOP presidential candidate Herman Cain, who joins me now. It is good to see you, sir.
Thank you, Trish.
Why should he stay out of this one?
Because the market is going to take care of Amazon as well as consumers. The big problem are the losses at the Postal Service. They've been losing money, and we have been subsidizing them as taxpayers for decades. Just last year, they lost $2.7 billion. This is why Amazon sees an opportunity to say, hey, I can get my goods delivered a lot cheaper through the Postal Service, and they are not looking at how much money that the Postal Service is losing. The real problem is for the Postal Service to fix the Postal Service, and it can't do it the way it should do it because the Congress has its thumb on what the Postal Service does. That's the real problem.
Let's leave the Postal Service alone for just a second and talk about some of the other issues here, because he's bringing up some of the antitrust concerns, and this is something I've actually heard for a while. One of the fears is that this is a company that's just getting too darn big for its own good. There's talk of Google getting too big. There's talk of Facebook getting too big. Is Amazon at risk for turning into a so-called monopoly because of its size?
Yes, they are at risk for turning into a monopoly because of their size. However, my experience has been whenever somebody starts to get that big, they're going to be challenged by someone. And as a result, that will then allow market forces to bring them down and to moderate their growth. For example, Walmart is making a lot of noise, and they're doing a lot of things that could challenge Amazon. So I'm not as concerned about that, Trish, as I am concerned about the ongoing losses of the Postal Service. Amazon is not the problem. Market
Amazon's the
forces
biggest
gonna take
customer,
care of
right?
that.
I mean, they pay
Yes,
the U.S.
they-
Postal Service for the work.
Exactly. Exactly. But look at the other problem that the Postal Service had even before Amazon became their biggest customer. This is where I believe the focus should be, and that is to have Congress let the Postal Service operate like a normal business. They can't do that right now because of constraints imposed by Congress. That's the biggest problem, and I believe that that's where the focus ought to be.
Mr. Kane, let me ask you about the other big issue here and something that's causing the market a lot of concerns, and that is trade and trade agreements that we have, specifically with China. China coming out today and basically saying, okay, now we're going to level tariffs on $3 billion worth of American goods. And somehow that has so many worked up on Wall Street to the point where you see a market that's down nearly 500 points today. Are these fears that you're seeing reflected on Wall Street right now in any way overblown, or do they have merit in your view?
I think that they're overblown, and here's why. Anytime there is a change, like when the president imposed tariffs, we saw a lot of negative volatility in the market. Now China has reacted. We saw some more negative volatility in the market. I think that this is all normal because those people that do day trading and trade on the short term, that's what's driving these fluctuations that we are seeing. Long term, let's see how it plays out. Like Charles Payne said, I agree with Charles. Long term, I don't think we have a lot to worry about at this point because, as the president attempted to do when he first imposed this, was to level the playing field. Now, China is flexing its muscles by saying, well, we are going to retaliate. Well, that sounds all well and good. But in the end, I think that that will bring them to the table and give us a better opportunity to level the playing field. And when we level the playing field, it is going to cause the market to settle down.
Yeah, well, if we level the playing field, it will cause the market to settle down. And guess what? It'll help us a whole lot because the way things look right now, I can just run one of these stats by you. Herman, do you know that if we send a car over there, if GM sends a car to China, they hit that GM vehicle with a 25% tariff? But you know what? If they send a car here, we charge 2.5%. Doesn't really seem fair, right? And the list goes on and on. I mean, wheat, for example, they charge 65%. We charge 0%. So, I mean, pick your product, everything. They are charging hefty tariffs on. We don't do it to them. Why do they do it to us? And shouldn't we be able to get in front of this in a way that matters now, as opposed to Herman having to deal with it 10, 20, 30 years from now when maybe it's too late?
I absolutely agree. Right now, it is food, fruit, and pork. Hey, they're going to come back maybe with something else. Here's what we have to allow time for everything to sort of balance out. That is the whole objective of what I believe that the president did in the first place. And it's early yet to know exactly how it is. When we reach that level playing field area between China and the United States and other countries, I believe the market will settle down, consumers will settle down, everybody will take a chill pill.
They all need to take that right now. Deep breaths, because it is not the end of the world as we know it. Thank you so much, Herman King. Good to see you.
Thank you.
All right, later on in this hour is Facebook opening the book on more regulation. Fresh comments from the CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, about another tech company we all know very well. May not be helping. We're going to debate it. Plus, the fight against California sanctuary state is spreading. Now, San Diego County may be joining Orange County in this whole battle. Meet the supervisor leading the charge. That's next.
And I'm sure they're across the street. I'm sure.
San Diego County could soon join Orange County in opposing California's new sanctuary state law. The San Diego County Board of Supervisors is considering backing the Trump administration's lawsuit against that law. A closed-door meeting is set for April 17th. San Diego County Supervisor Diane Jacob is leading this effort, and she joins us now. Diane, welcome. Good to have you on the show.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here.
So tell us what's going on here. Why are you potentially joining up with the likes of Orange County on this one?
This is a major public safety issue. And let's be clear, this is about people that are coming into our country illegally and they're breaking the law. They're criminals. And we've had a really, really good relationship between our Sheriff's Department and federal law enforcement agencies in the past, before this law was put into effect. And this basically places a huge wedge between that relationship. So we've got probably in San Diego County jails about 7% at any given time of our jail population are people who are illegally in this country. And that amounts to, could be up to 300, 400 individuals. Those are people, if they're let loose and we don't have that cooperative arrangement between local law enforcement and the federal authorities, they're released onto the streets to commit another crime. And who's to say that they're not going to do just that? Public safety is a #1 priority of government. That's the reason governments were founded in the first place, keep people safe. And that's the #1 priority in San Diego County. So I'm hopeful that my board in San Diego County will join Orange County in their fight against this really bad law in California.
Well, Diane, what kind of response are you seeing from other supervisors there?
Well, we'll know on the 17th of April.
I mean, just talking to them and them hearing your thoughts, are they receptive, or are you a bit alone in this effort?
Well, I am cautiously optimistic that we'll have at least 3 votes out of the 5, and that's all it takes. It would be great to have it be unanimous, just because this is a major public safety issue. It's about keeping people safe. It's about keeping our neighborhoods safe.
What do you think of the Oakland mayor and all that's happened there in terms of trying to protect those people that are in that area illegally?
Well, I think they're wrong. I think they're absolutely wrong. There is an issue of the law, and there are those that really throw some very disparaging remarks against people like me and others who stand up for the law, and we stand up for the Constitution. And I think this is
Well, they might say you're being un-American, right? I mean, isn't that kind of the line? Like, oh, this country has to welcome everyone. We have a history of wonderful immigration. We've all come from immigrants. So if you're not willing to allow these people to be here illegally, they may look at you, Diane, and say, well, you don't embrace what America is. You are somehow a bad person because you don't want that melting pot of diversity here in the United States. What do you say in response?
Well, we have diversity here, and we have a legal immigration policy and a legal path for people to come into this country, and we've had it for many, many years. I am proud to be an American, and I'm proud to welcome immigrants into this country who come to America through the legal process. That's what makes America the way it is today. I think there's another important issue here. Is federal law going to be prevailing over states' rights on this particular issue?
Yeah.
There are certain issues that are delegated in the Constitution to states. This is not one.
No, I mean, look, if you're a country, you got to have borders. You got to know who's there, who's not there. I hear you. And as far as state versus federal, one would think the federal law would certainly trump state on this one. But we'll see. Maybe it goes all the way to the Supreme Court before anything is finally decided. But we'll watch your efforts there, as well as Orange County. Thank you very much, Diane, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, President Trump slamming Mexico for reportedly allowing a caravan of immigrants to head to our southern border. What is the plan once they arrive? Border Patrol Acting Deputy Commissioner Mr. Vitiello is here. And tech stocks may be heading down, but Elon Musk and SpaceX are ready to send this craft up. We're going to take you to it live at the bottom of the hour. A caravan of immigrants, estimated at over 1,000 people, making its way right now through Mexico towards the United States of America. President Trump slamming Mexico, tweeting, "Mexico has the absolute power not to let these large caravans of people enter their country. They must stop them at their northern border, which they can do because their border laws work. Not allow them to pass through into our country, which has no effective border laws." William Lajeunesse has the very latest for us, and we go to him now. Hi, William.
Well, Trish, typically immigrants hook up with a smuggler to get over the U.S. border. This is different because the trip is organized by People Without Borders, which is advertising this trip and raising money online, guiding and coaching the mostly Honduran immigrants on how to claim asylum when they reach the U.S. border in probably the next 2 weeks. Now, all they have to do is come here and claim they basically have a fear to go back to their country, and they don't have to provide any evidence. So, under the law, most asylum claims end up before an immigration judge. The problem is, because of a backlog in the courts, shelter space, and court orders, agents have to release these immigrants, usually at a bus station. Sunday, the president asked Mexico to stop the group, which is unlikely, though it is against Mexican law, and Mexico did deport 70,000 Central Americans last year.
Let's make sure that if they do come to the U.S. border, that they are able to go through the full and fair process of seeking asylum if that's what they desire.
So it is my understanding, Trish, that the administration is really pressuring Mexico. They don't want a situation up here where you've got maybe 1,000, 1,300 immigrants showing up in Tijuana, and what would that look like? And because then they'd have to give them an asylum hearing, and in all likelihood, if they don't have space, let them out.
Wow. So is there anything that the White House can do at this point to stop this caravan?
Pressure Mexico. It is against Mexican law, and since they know many of the immigrants have said they're going to come between the ports of entry, which is illegal entry, then they know that they're here to violate U.S. law. They don't want to be seen assisting that.
All right.
That would be the argument.
William Lejeunesse, thank you so much. So what can we do? What should we do? For that, we are going right now to Deputy Commissioner for U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Ronald Vitiello. Good to have you here, sir. We'll ask the same question to you. What can we do at this point? What can be done in order to prevent the situation that William just described?
Well, obviously, a discussion and a monitoring about what's going on in Mexico with our Mexican counterparts. That's what we're attempting to do now. We watched this very closely over the weekend. Lots of high-level discussion about what can be done. And then, obviously, at the ports of entry, in between the ports of entry, the men and women or CBP will remain vigilant and respond to traffic as they see it.
Fox News has gotten word that there may be a memo circulating there in Mexico, that our U.S. attaché there in Mexico City may have seen this memo that shows Mexican government officials, authorities there in Mexico are actually helping this caravan. Can you confirm that?
I've not seen that memo. Mexico does have a number of public service agencies that are involved in when people cross borders. They have their own immigration authorities. The federal police are sometimes active on the border. And then they have this Grupo Beta, which is actually designed as part of their immigration authority they assist migrants, but migrants like we assist in distress and in those situations. So there's some crossover there, but I haven't seen the memo.
You haven't seen the memo. Look, it seems that this, once again, is putting our weak border into the spotlight in such a way that is causing great concern, not just in the White House, but obviously people living along that border. Do you see this particular situation, this caravan, bringing things to a head in a way that is meaningful enough that we might actually see a commitment from Congress to provide the money needed for the wall?
So yeah, we think that more border security is a good thing. So that's why when the president asked us to do planning for the wall, we gave him our requirements. Congress did give us some money in 2018. We used some money in 2017 as directed by the president. So we're making improvements. We're going to try to get that wall laid down and add to the border security situation, give us more capability. But if these policies and the law doesn't change that advantages people who come as children or part as families, those loopholes will still exist. And so that's another addition to our capability at the line, that physical border. But then you have to do these things on the legislative and the policy front to shore up those loopholes so we don't have this continued traffic at our southwest border.
Understood. Mr. Vitiello, good to see you. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thanks for the opportunity.
All right, tech stocks, everyone, dragging down a whole lot of stocks today, and something Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg just said in defense of his company may not be helping all that much. Plus, SpaceX ready to fire up another mission to the International Space Station. We're ready for liftoff right after this. I'll see you right back here right after this. Amazon shares diving another 5% today. The value of CEO Jeff Bezos' Amazon stock has lost nearly $18 billion since Amazon hit a record high on March 12th. But I'm not feeling too bad. Are you? All right, 3, 2, 1, a liftoff. We're live in Cape Canaveral, Florida, where SpaceX is about to launch another mission to the International Space Station. Phil Keating is in Miami with the latest. Good to see you there, Phil. I understand, is it true that both the rocket and the capsule have flown before?
Yeah, most of this rocket stack has flown to low Earth orbit before. The bottom 157 feet of it, that's the first stage of the Falcon 9 rocket that propelled a cargo ship to the space station back in August. And the Dragon capsule itself hauled up cargo and supplies and science experiments up to the space station almost 2 years ago to the date. So these are both flight tested, flight proven, and you can even see the re-landing scars on the first stage rocket from when it came down in August, landing on that autonomous drone ship out there in the Atlantic. Now, as of now, the rocket's been loaded with rocket-grade kerosene, liquid oxygen. Right now, the flight computer is going through all the
Falcon 9
text.
And the Dragon space.
And we have blastoff. Let's take a listen.
International Space Station, humanity's home in low Earth orbit. And the Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. SpaceX ascent commentary performed by several people. Engineer calls out propulsion events. Avionics engineer calls out avionics health and Dragon separation. The range coordinator calls
That glorious shot. The weather turned out great for this 4:30 Eastern Time launch. The capsule itself has about 6,000 pounds of supplies, payloads, vehicle hardware, and roughly 50 science experiments on board. And if all goes well here, it'll arrive at the space station early Wednesday morning, where a full crew of 6 astronauts and cosmonauts await. This is SpaceX's 14th cargo run for NASA, happening from Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station that is adjacent to the Kennedy Space Center, and SpaceX uses pads at both Space Launch Complex 40 at the Air Force Station, as well as the historic Launch Pad 39A on Kennedy Space Center property. Trish?
Yeah, no, Phil, it's really incredible. It's incredible to see it. As you said, just a glorious live picture coming into us right now from Cape Canaveral. I want to ask you, SpaceX, it's not going to try and land and recover today's rocket. Why is that?
Yeah, you know, they have gotten really good at doing that successfully. They landed 10 and reused them rockets all in the past year, and at roughly 2 minutes and 40 seconds after blastoff, that is when the first stage of the Falcon 9 rocket is going to detach from the second stage, which will then keep pushing the Dragon capsule off into space. Well, unlike most recent highlights we've seen of those rockets spectacularly landing on land or on the ship, this one they're going to actually use for data gathering for all of the SpaceX engineers studying the rocket. It's a Block 4 Falcon 9 rocket. These are being phased out by a new generation, Block 5s. Those will fly 10 times or more. These Block 4s are really only flying 2 times, so this is the second flight for it, and they're going to test out basically flying this rocket to the limit of its capability just to gather data from the rocket and its performance as it descends back down to the ocean. It probably, if it has any fuel left, will do a little reverse thrust as if it was going to land on the ship, but it'll be so far out in the ocean they'll just go ahead and sink it into the water and just gather up all that data.
Oh, wow. We know there's some science experiments going up with this launch, some interesting ones. I know you've been looking into them. Tell us what you're most fascinated with, what they've got going up now into space.
Yeah, there's 3 science experiments out of the 50 that are really worth noting. One is a new way of looking at severe thunderstorms from high altitude positions. There are also 7 new containers on board the cargo ship to be delivered at the space station. Those will be used to grow plants. And when you think about long trips to space, like say to Mars, it will be extremely helpful if the astronauts for that long 6 to 9 month journey would be able to eat their own food that they actually grew on board, because taking up all that for a 3-year mission, food, water will be taking up a lot of space on that ship. And also the other one I wanted to mention was they're studying pathogens through the use of fruit flies. That's what the astronauts will be doing up there in space over the next 6 months or so. And the capsule itself will be unloaded Wednesday, and then it will stay up there for about 30 days. Then they'll repack it with trash and other ongoing science experiments to then descend back down to Earth and splash down in the Pacific Ocean. And right now, everything's looking really, really good for this mission.
Just incredible. Really incredible. Phil Keating, thank you so much. Good talking to you.
My pleasure. Thanks, Trish.
All right, not so good news, though, for Elon Musk's other baby, and that's Tesla. Shares dropping another 5% today. The automaker confirming Autopilot was engaged during this deadly California crash back in March, and Tesla says the driver was warned a number of times to grab the steering wheel. Well, the hits just keep coming for another company right now, Facebook. CEO Mark Zuckerberg escalating the war of words with Apple CEO Tim Cook. And Washington is watching. Will all investors be paying? We're going to talk about that. I'll see you here right after this.
Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, gave an interview the other day, and he was asked, what would you do if you were in Mark Zuckerberg's shoes? He said, I would not be in Mark Zuckerberg's shoes. Apple sells products to users. It doesn't sell users to advertisers, and so it's a sounder business model that doesn't open itself to these problems.
You know, I find that argument that if you're not paying, that somehow we can't care about you, to be extremely glib. Right, and not at all aligned with the truth. I don't think at all that means that we don't care about people. I think to the contrary, I think it's important that we don't all get Stockholm syndrome and let the companies that work hard to charge you more convince you that they actually care more about you, because that sounds ridiculous to me.
The face-off between Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg and Apple CEO Tim Cook, it's getting kind of nasty. And Washington regulars are getting kind of antsy. Heather Zumaraga says Zuckerberg didn't do himself any favors with that defense. But Scott Martin disagrees. Heather, I am starting with you. So you hear Mark Zuckerberg getting a little offended, saying, well, look, you know, just because Apple's trying to justify its high prices with the fact that it tries to guard its customers' data, that's not, in his view, an appropriate line of attack. What do you say?
I say Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg should be doing nothing more than trying to protect users' data at this point in time. I know he was specifically questioned on Tim Cook's statements or critique of Facebook not being able to guard users' data. But look, after an incident of Cambridge Analytica where 50 million users had their data breached, stolen, hacked, whatever you want to call it, without our permission, that is not okay. Now you have to testify in Congress, in front of Congress here in about a week or two. That is where your head should be at, not at attacking the world's most valuable company with Tim Cook at the helm.
Scott?
Yeah, the word about data being permissive is a tough one, Trish, because last time I checked, a lot of users on the internet, when they go onto Google or Twitter, or in this case in Facebook, they give up that data willingly. There's things that you can turn off that, yes, I know were buried in a lot of the settings on a lot of Facebook users' profiles that you probably didn't see or check. You probably didn't read the privacy policies, because let's face it, they're thousands of pages as long, at least as far as the internet scrolling goes. So it looks like a lot of stuff, thousands of words.
They got in a lot of trouble for that when they were handing out mortgages left and right, and they didn't actually encourage anyone to read the thousands of pages of fine print.
Fair call, Trish, and the robo-signers too, but that stuff was also illegal. Let's face it. United States has done a pretty poor job, as far as I'm concerned, regulating some of these internet companies, regulating social media when it comes to privacy policies, unlike, say, our counterparts in Europe, which have been doing it for years and passing laws to this effect. So I'm saying it's bad on Facebook, it's bad on Google and some of these other names to totally sell off data willy-nilly, but it's not like it was something completely illegal, because a lot of those provisions were not in place.
Well, Heather, part of the problem, right, is that is its business model. Let's not forget, how does it make money? It makes money via advertising. Advertisers want to go on Facebook because they want to target Heather, you, Scott, you, me. They want to be able to target whether you're male or female, your age, your interests, where you live, et cetera, et cetera. And Facebook says, here you go. And they serve it up on a silver platter. None of us benefit from that other than we're allowed to talk to each other online.
Sure. And how many users from the age of 18 to, let's say, 35 really understand how their data is being used and if they're okay with that? So I get it. It's a free open source platform and tool that everyone in the world can use. And that's great if you don't want to charge a fee for it. But then make sure it's blatantly clear that you're selling our data to third party. Or if I'm downloading your Messenger app on my phone, that gives you use to all of my texts and contacts. That's crazy. And thank goodness I've never done that, because I heard if you delete it, it's still accessible to Facebook. They still have access. So Alexis will never be in my house, and I'm still on Facebook, but I don't know how much longer that'll go on.
Hey, Scott, how much longer is Washington going to tolerate Facebook? We were talking earlier about whether or not Amazon is a monopoly. I mean, there might be similar antitrust questions raised at some point regarding Facebook. And if not that, just a whole lot more regulation for this company.
Yeah, I mean, Washington is definitely on the prowl, Trish. We've seen that in a lot of other tech company stocks, so far in the last couple weeks since this news broke. Alexa does love me, by the way, because we give her a lot of data, especially from my kids who talk to the thing, all day long. But you're right. There is some regulation coming. I mean, the sad thing is for these companies, and I am still on Team Zuck if there is one left. Maybe it's an island of one here, because he did do what he could do for the company along the way, making money for it. And they did self-regulate, which obviously failed. So when it comes to DC and the FTC and things like that, I'm sure they're happy to step in here and protect the consumer.
The fake news feeds and Cambridge Analytica, they've got a lot to account for right now, for sure. Anyway, good to hear all sides. Thank you so much, Heather and Scott. Critics, everyone, still blasting the DOJ and FBI for stonewalling Republicans in Congress. Now the president is weighing in. We have the follow-up for you next.
Getting material that's redacted, that has names in it that are blocked out. We need that material unredacted so we can find out the extent of what was going on in 2016 when the FBI, in an astonishing manner, conducted one investigation with regard to one presidential candidate and bent over backwards not to prosecute her, and then launched another investigation where they definitely were leaning into it with insurance policies and secret plans.
Was that because they were taking sides, Chairman?
I am very concerned that there were a number of people in key positions at the FBI who were taking sides.
House Judiciary Chairman Bob Goodlatte blasting the FBI for stonewalling on Cavuto Live just this Saturday. Now he's issuing subpoenas for the information. And this morning, the president tweeted this: "So sad that the Department of Justice and the FBI are slow walking or even not giving the unredacted documents requested by Congress. An embarrassment to our country." Let's go right now to former DOJ official Tom Dupree, who says, "Speed is of the essence." Tom, it's good to see you. Why are they stonewalling?
Well, Trish, I think what's going on here is, look, DOJ likes to be in the business of getting evidence from other people, not to have to produce their own evidence to Congress. And when you take that circumstance and you add in the fact that I'm sure some of the material is classified and it's possible that some of the material is even evidence of DOJ wrongdoing, it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that this may not be at the top of their priority list. I was glad to see that the FBI director, Chris Wray, said that they need to do a better job. They need to get this stuff out the door faster. He's put twice as many people on the document review job in order to turn this around as quickly as possible. And of course, this morning, the president did his part to light a fire under his appointees at DOJ.
So what happens if they don't bother to turn this stuff over, Tom? If they just continue stonewalling or taking their own sweet time and they don't give Congress what Congress is asking for?
Well, I think you'd see two things happen. I think you'd see Congress up the ante. They've sent out subpoenas. They can try to hold people in contempt if they think that people at DOJ are trying to obstruct their investigation. I think the other thing you'd see is I think you'd see the president ratchet up the volume. It's extraordinary here, Trish, in that you've got the Republicans on the Hill along with the president fighting against the Department of Justice, which in theory is under the control of the president. I mean, these are people who are subject to the president's orders. So it's a very unusual situation we find ourselves in. I'm convinced that the FBI, at least now, is taking this request seriously, and that they will try to expedite this review to get Congress the documents and the evidence that Congress needs.
Even if it means implicating themselves.
Absolutely. And look, DOJ does internal investigations all the time, and it does have a history of rooting out misconduct that's happened within the agency. And if that's the circumstance here, I fully believe that the FBI will turn those documents over to Congress. I don't think that they can stonewall Congress. I don't think that they can hide behind redactions if there's material that is not legitimately classified. So I think at the end of the day, these documents are going to see the light of day.
Tom, what do you think we're going to learn?
Well, I think we are going to learn a little bit about what was going on behind the scenes at the Department of Justice and the FBI specifically in the year 2016. They had a lot on their plate. They had a presidential election. They had various allegations about both the Democratic candidate and the Republican candidate. They had ongoing investigations, and obviously they made the decisions that they did. I think these documents are going to cast light on the decision-making process. It's a chance for the Congress and the American people to look under the hood at what went on.
Yeah. We may not like what we see. Anyway, Tom Dupree, thank you very much. Good to see you today. Coming up, everyone, the president yucking it up with the Easter Bunny today. But it's another potential visitor that has everyone in a tizzy. We are going to explain after this. Would Trump be mad to invite Vlad to the White House? It could happen, actually, sooner than you think. Then again, it may not happen at all. Let's go to John Roberts right now at the White House with the latest on this maybe invite. Hey, John.
Trish, good afternoon to you. The last time that President Trump and President Vladimir Putin of Russia spent any substantive time together was at the G20 summit in Hamburg last year. They also saw each other at the APEC conference later that year, but did not have a bilateral meeting because the two leaders thought, well, there wasn't that much to talk about. Now it seems like there was a lot to talk about because, according to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, as the president himself confirmed on March 20th, hours after his last telephone call with President Putin, the two had discussed a bilateral meeting in the not-too-distant future at a number of potential venues, including the White House. We have nothing further to add at this time. So, the two presidents talking about a potential meeting here at the White House. It would be the first time that President Putin has been to the White House since 2001 when he visited President Bush in November of that year. Now, word of this first emerged from the Kremlin and seemed in a way to be somewhat smacking the White House around a little bit for the expulsion, the announced expulsion of the 60 Russian diplomats and intelligence operators. The spokesman for the Kremlin, Yuri Ushakov, saying, quote, against the backdrop of these events, talking about the expulsions, it's difficult to discuss the possibility of holding a summit. The announcement by Russia today appeared to be more political posturing than anything. Ushakov also saying, one day, at one time or another, we can arrive at the start of a serious and constructive dialogue, and that a meeting, quote, would be rather important and beneficial for both countries as well as for the entire global community. Now, one country has already come forward, Trish, to say we'd be happy to host a summit between the American president and the Russian president. Serbia has come forward to say we've got some room in Belgrade. If the two leaders would like to meet there, we'd be happy to have them. We'll see. Stay tuned.
Indeed we will. Thanks so much, John. Well, is a possible meeting between President Trump and Russian President Putin the right or the wrong move, whether or not it's at the White House or not? Let's go right now to retired Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis. Good to see you, Colonel. Should he sit down with Vladimir Putin right now?
Yeah, well, Trish, keep in mind the Russians have thousands of nuclear weapons. They just tested ICBM. They're talking about hypersonic cruise missiles. Putin had the State of the Nation speech just a month ago and really hyped this stuff. You know, you need to sit down, even if your enemy, and I consider Russia an enemy, is doing things that you disagree with. There's not much trade, but there is a nuclear difference and a standoff. In fact, President Trump's gone ahead and asked the Congress to consider small nuclear weapons because the defense minister in Russia said earlier this year that they're going to move forward with the idea of first nuclear use, de-escalation, what they call it. These are dangerous things that we're talking about, and we have to deal with them. And plus, the New START treaty is about to expire, and the 1987 INF treaty was violated by the Russians. They need to talk.
Okay. So they need to talk, but let me just ask you this. Do you really think it's going to accomplish much? I mean, I hear you, and I think talk is always good. I actually am a proponent of him sitting down with Kim Jong-un. That said, you know, Vladimir Putin, he's definitely playing chess, as are we. So do you accomplish much in one of these, you know, meetings where you have a nice little photo op?
Well, there are two ways of thinking about this. In 1961 in Vienna, Austria, Kennedy sat down with Khrushchev. And as a result, I would argue a year later, Khrushchev took a risk and we had the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. That was a bad outcome. But they went in not understanding one another and had different agendas. This president is a very strong president. He got something from President Xi of China, last year. Perhaps he'll get something from Kim Jong-un in a month or so. But with Vladimir Putin, he's an autocrat too. He's not to be trusted. So we need to sit down.
I don't think any of them are, right? I mean, certainly not going to trust the likes of Kim Jong-un either.
You're right. We can't trust them. However, not to talk to your enemy, I think, is naive in a world which is incredibly dangerous today.
Yeah, I hear you on that. So maybe some good can come out of it, and I guess you got to kind of figure, really, could it be all that bad? Especially if you're going to sit down with the North Korean dictator. Anyway, it's good to see you, Colonel. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Trish.
You know, Neil is back tomorrow, everyone, and you can come watch me on Fox Business, where you see me every day, 2 p.m. on the Intelligence Report there on FBN. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we get a better market day than we did today. I'll see you tomorrow.